Peter Kyle, thank you very much indeed for joining us this splendid afternoon. If the polls are to be believed, the Labour Party are heading for a super majority in the House of Commons at the election next week. Why did Keir Starmer only score a draw with Rishi Sunak last night?
Well, firstly, the polls are not to be believed. There are still millions of people out there who have not made up their minds. I've been right around the country in this campaign, and I know there's a lot of people who are looking very closely at the Labour Party and others and still to make their mind up, so we are not taking anything for granted. Secondly, on the debate last night, what we saw was a desperate and at times hysterical Prime Minister badgering Keir, who was acting like the Prime Minister that the country wants for our country. I mean, you had Rishi Sunak acting like an opposition leader, and you had Keir Starmer, who was acting with dignity, talking about the future. I mean, Rishi Sunak did nothing about than just attack Labour, whereas Keir was there talking about policies that are going to tackle the challenges we have, create new opportunities for our country. It was rooted in the future in a really positive way, and I was proud of him for that.
Okay, but Peter Kyle, it did fall apart a little bit when it came to illegal migration. Rishi Sunak certainly scored a point or two on that little discussion, did he not? Saying, essentially, pushing Keir Starmer to actually say what he's going to do with illegal migrants who are here already, with countries that we don't have returns agreements with. It all fell apart.
Well, forgive me for smiling, but what's fallen apart when it comes to small boat crossings? What's fallen apart with irregular and at times illegal migration to our country is not what Keir Starmer said. It's what this current government has done. Even after they got the Rwanda bill through, even though their own MPs voted against it, you've seen the Rwanda bill do nothing as a deterrent, which is what they said it was, because we now have record numbers of people crossing the channel. We have 63,000 people living in hotels around the country.
But is that not,
costing
is that
£8 million
not because the Rwanda flights haven't taken off yet?
None of them are being protested.
That's because the Rwanda flights haven't taken off yet, surely.
No, they are sitting in hotels, and the law that they've just passed on Rwanda means that the people who are currently in hotels, they're not going to be processed and they're not going to be sent to Rwanda. The government have said not say what they're going to do with it. Keir was very clear last night. We are going to start processing the backlog. We are going to set up the Border Security Command, and we're going to go and start tackling and using terror legislation against the people who are conducting the people smuggling. Bearing in mind, journalists right now in the last 24 hours have tracked down people smugglers. They've found them, had conversations with them. Why is it our government is incapable of going and finding them and locking them up? You know, why is journalists able to do stuff that this government can't? Nothing proves why
Peter,
change is so
you might be
needed in our
harking back to a day when we had sovereignty and jurisdiction over the Middle East. I'm afraid those days are long gone. The British Empire has receded into the mists of time. How on earth do we have jurisdiction over countries that are run by governments with whom we do not have ordinary relations?
Well, this government told us that we would take back control of our borders. We do have control of the English Channel. And we seem incapable of actually doing a deal and cooperating with our nearest neighbours, taking control of the people smugglers that are driving people across. Well, what you're talking about there, of course, is tackling the issues at root. And of course, I've been on your programme several times in recent years to talk exactly about this issue. Of course, the government pulled out the use of military in areas of political instability such as Yemen and others where they were delivering aid. They cut the aid budget to many of the countries that are driving migrants.
The last time your party was in office, we invaded Afghanistan. Are you suggesting that that's the solution? To take the Taliban out? And
no,
I can't see how else you prosecute, using courts, people operating in a country run by the Taliban. I mean, unless you're going to root out that government and go for regime change, how do you have this legalistic approach?
No, I'm talking about there are countries where there is political instability, where there's the need for long-term development in those countries. Of course, our government has turned its back on the kind of development work that stops people fleeing in the first place. We have stopped engaging in parts of the world that is the driving force of migration. Now, what we're talking about here is the refusal to even clear the backlog, which is their own backlog.
Yeah,
so
it sounds like you don't know what you're going to do with those. It sounds though that it sounds like you don't know what you're going to do with those people who have arrived here, had their case looked at, and have been denied asylum. That's the issue here. What are you going to do with those people? The government have said that they want to send them to Rwanda. What's the plan with those people?
I'm sorry, but you're factually wrong on that. When it comes to the backlog, before the legislation was passed, which is over 65,000 people, the legislation doesn't apply to them. So the government aren't going to process, they're not going to return, and they are not going to send to Rwanda. What we will do is process the entire backlog, and only then will we know where people have come from. We do not know where people have come from. We do not know what their right to remain or how many of the people we need to deport back and send back to other countries is in the first place. So until we get that first step of processing the people who are here, I mean, I don't think people realise that there are tens and tens of thousands of people claiming asylum in our country now, and the government isn't even processing them. So once we process them, we can take the steps of knowing who is here, who has the right to be here, who needs to be returned, and we can set about delivering that at that time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Peter Carl. Great to speak to you, Shadow Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. Thank you very much.